We're in the middle of a series. It's an epic series. It's about 15 weeks now. We've been in the middle of a series. But we got some time. But there's something that's happened. It's not really brand new, but I've definitely seen this a lot lately. A slogan, I guess you could say. I don't know if you've seen this or not. It says, the only thing more powerful than hate is love. If you've ever seen that hung out, a banner somewhere. And, I don't think anybody is going to really disagree with that statement. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you know some people, or maybe you hear this morning, you're like, hate is going to conquer everything, I mean, I don't think many people, whether you're a religious person here or not, and you don't believe in God, I don't think many people are going to just disagree with that statement that the only thing more powerful than hate is love. And what happens in our current culture is that people usually take that slogan and they use that to help support an agenda or support some sort of a cause that they have. And there's a lot of confusion in our country. I don't know if you figure that out yet or not. It's deeply divided. There's a lot of confusion, and we desperately need clarity. We need conviction. We need to understand, what does it really mean to love? What is love? What is love? I could sing a lot of love songs for us here this morning. No, I'm just going to pause on that. I'm going to wait. So, what does love, really mean? And so there's cultural matters, but there's also personal matters in our own life. Because I would be shocked if not every single person that's present here today, this past week, has some sort of relational conflict, whether it was intense or not intense, but something happened in your life that was related to either you or someone else not being loving. It's personal, it's cultural, but it's personal, and it applies to our everyday life. Can love really make a difference? Does love really find a way? Culture tells us that love is affirmation, and God says that love is transformation. Culture says that love is an emotion. God says love is an action. And when speaking about that, what are we talking about God anyways? Can't we just talk about love? Why do you need to bring God into the picture? Because He's actually the one that's going to kind of create some division. Can we just love everybody and just everything's utopia? And why do you got to bring God in there? And here's why we need to bring God into this picture. Because the Bible tells us in 1 John 4:7-8, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. And anyone who does not know God, and anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. God is love. And I love that because it doesn't just say that God loves, like He's going to do some actions, which He certainly does that, and He demonstrates His love. But in His very essence, the substance of who God is love. You can't have God without love. You can't have love without God. So if we want to understand what real love is, we need to understand who God is. Because God is love. God is love. Jesus came and He demonstrated to us what love looks like. And then gave us a command. In 1 John 3:16, He says this, By this we know love, that He laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. Jesus demonstrated to us what love looks like. And love is laying down your life for one another. Love requires a cost. Love requires a sacrifice. If you're not willing to sacrifice, if you're not willing to endure some sort of a cost, you're probably not loving people. God is love. He demonstrated. So He gave us this command in John 13. I'm kind of setting this up to where we're going here this morning. John 13:34-35 says, A new command I give to you, this is Jesus, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. Notice how it doesn't say if you attend church, if you know the Bible, if you sing worship songs, if you are part of this particular group or not, or a different group. He says the way, the distinguishing marker, the identity to identify if you are a follower of Jesus is love. And I don't know about you, but we miss that so much. I can miss that so much in my life. We can make it about something else other than love. And maybe you're here and you're like, oh, that just sounds kind of just too emotional and too cheesy. God is love, and Jesus says, the way that the world's going to know that you're my disciple is love. That tells me something. That the church should look different. Different enough for people to make people who don't believe in God notice something about a group of people who are followers of Jesus. That group different. There's something different about that group. And what's the difference? It's love. It's love. Not only are we commanded to love one another, I love it, Romans 5:5, it says, and hope does not disappoint us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. As a follower of Jesus, if you are a reborn Christian, if you have been reborn, you have committed your life to following Jesus, you have been rescued, you have been forgiven by God, and you are following Jesus, God says that He has poured out His love into your hearts. That means He's given you something that you don't have. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, you and I have a supernatural ability to love. It's a supernatural ability to love outside of our own human ability. It's supernatural. He's poured His love into our hearts. It's a love that you pour into your heart, and it just changes us from the inside out, and then it's supposed to just spill over. It's supposed to just pour over. And this love that He put in our heart, it's supposed to be expressed with each other, and it's a visible expression of Jesus. I want to know what God looks like. One of the ways you and I can understand what God looks like is when you and I are around one another and the way we love one another, because we're supposed to love the way that He loves. But listen, you may be here this morning and you're like, you may be in a situation you think it's over. And you're ready to hang it up. And you don't think there's a way. There's too much hurt. There's too much pain. There's too much that's happened in my life. We need to call it quits. And what I want to tell you this morning is that God says, no, you don't. You don't call it quits. You have supernatural ability to restore and to renew. God can make a way. His love can truly make a way. I have seen marriages, I know personally, marriages where there has been an affair, and they have reconciled that relationship and renewed that marriage, and that marriage was better than it was beforehand because it was the love of God that was poured into these people's hearts that were enabled them to forgive, enabled them to restore, enabled them to renew. That's the power of God in our life. We have supernatural ability to love beyond what we can do on our own. So we're going to take a look at the famous love chapter everybody knows about. You don't even know, you might not even be a Christian and very religious person, but you're familiar with this verse. It's just used all throughout culture. And before I take into this and get us to get a portrait of really what love looks like, I want us to understand a little bit of the context that it's written in. So this guy named Paul, he's an apostle, a follower of Jesus. By the way, he used to murder Christians. We want to skip over that part, but and God just totally changed his life, renewed his life, and God poured out His love in his heart, God's love in his heart to love people, to give his life for Christ eventually. And he's writing to a church that he helped start in Corinth. And in the city of Corinth, this is a very sexualized culture. It's very perverse. It's all kinds of stuff going on, and there's a church that's birthed in this culture. And so Paul's writing to this church because he's not there anymore, and they're a young church and they're growing, and they're struggling, just like we do. They're trying to understand. They're trying to figure things out, just like we're not a perfect church, and you're not perfect Christian. You know, we're all struggling. We're all trying to grow and to understand who God is and to follow Jesus. But he writes this church, and here, let me just kind of explain a couple of things. This is a church, okay? This is what they're dealing with. They're division, okay? Mass division in the church. Pride. People are just being real prideful about stuff. Sexual morality is going on in the church. There's an abuse of freedom. They're having all kinds of disorder in the middle of worship service. They're taking the Lord's Supper, people getting drunk. They're confused on doctrinal issues. There's a distrust of leadership. This is God's church. So Paul's writing this letter, and he loves them. And he's trying to help them understand what it means to follow Jesus. And one of the things that they did is they had apparently a very gifted church. A lot of spiritual gifts that people had. And what they did is they were elevating certain spiritual gifts over others. It was like, oh, you have the gift of teaching, or you have the gift of prophecy. Like, you're up here. And if you have the gift of helps, you're like down here, you know? And so there was like a lot of prioritizing things. And Paul's, at this point in the letter, he's writing to them and explaining to them, like, listen, there's no difference. We're all one body, and everybody's important, everybody's significant. But in the midst of that conversation, he pens this particular part of the letter, inspired by the Holy Spirit, to give us insight and understanding. And he says there's a most excellent way, there's a better way. And this is what spiritual maturity looks like. And so let's take a look and see what Paul says to us about what love looks like. As we're going to read through this together, we're going to look at a few things about what love is, but I want you to, maybe God's going to lead you in a different, think about something different, but here's a couple of areas that I think will be helpful for us as we look at this. Number one, look at your own life. Don't look at your spouse. Some of you in here are be like, get them, God. If you're doing that, that's probably an indication you need to be really listening to what's being said. But you should look at your marriage. You should look at your family, your kids, where you work. You should look at your church, what this looks like in our church. Because this is what God's called us to do, is to love one another. I'm going to read this whole text, and we're going to unpack it together. Here, verse 1, chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge. And if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. That's pretty bold. That's that's intense. Paul's like laying it out. Listen, you guys understand, you have nothing without love. And he goes in verse 4, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. He's talking about these spiritual gifts people have. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall fully know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love. How do you identify love? What's a marker? What does it look like? The first thing we hear is that love is patient. Love is patient. Verse 4, love is patient. This is a description of love in here, and it is not contingent on circumstances. It's not contingent if people have the same beliefs as you. This is love. Love is going to act this way in all circumstances. Love's not going to contradict itself. Love doesn't decide to express itself just when it feels right or when it's convenient. Love loves even when there's a cost. You see in here that love has an attitude. And we often think it's like, you got an attitude. That's really a bad thing. It's like, you got a bad attitude. But love has an attitude. It has a way. It has character. And, we live in a world that is going to place their perceived truth on a pedestal. And they believe that they have the high moral ground. because of what they perceive to be true. And somehow we have lost our way, we have lost our mind, and think because I have a high moral ground, I can completely act unrighteous. No, you can. No, you can't. This right here, love says, no, you can't. We often think, I'm going to love, but if someone offends me, I have the right. You hurt me, you offended me, you did something to me. And I'm not saying that we lay this out like some sort of a flowchart or something, but isn't it true that we often think, well, I have the right to respond to you in a real unrighteous way? You hurt me, and I'm going to be real ugly to you, and I'm going to talk about you, and I'm going to be real rude back to you. Love says, no, you can't. That's not love. We often justify our behavior because there's some sort of a cause or there's something that we think have been done to us. And love says, listen, you can't do that. Listen, love is a relational choice. Let's look at this, patience. Love is a relational choice. Okay, it's going to be expressed in relationships with each other, and it's a choice. It's a choice. Love is patience. This is the very first word that is used to describe love. It's patience. I think that God has a pretty vast vocabulary, don't you think? Don't you think that God is like, maybe he's going to use some real big words, you know? I mean, you think it's like, he's God, he's a real complicated, intelligent being, you know? I mean, you think, I think he should really use some like words that you're going to have to look in the dictionary or, what does this mean? He says patient. Because that's how he describes himself. And actually, the two pillars of love are kindness and patience, and God is patience. That means patience is when you and I respond positively to negative circumstances. Patience withholds retaliation. Patience pauses. Patience thinks before it speaks. Patience doesn't have a short fuse. Patient people, they hold their tongue. Patience is when you and I control our emotions instead of letting our emotions control us. And patience prioritizes the relationship with people. Look at Proverbs 15:18. It says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. A hot-tempered man stirs up strife. Again, we live in a world that we feel like there's a past because we are hot-tempered about something that we believe is true. And I don't want to park on all this, but just listen. We live in a world that is full of propaganda. And, if we can just stop it, do you realize that we live in a world that is trying to divide and create hate in our country? And Christians are sitting there just taking it like candy. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? We have got to be different. We have got to love the way that Jesus has called us to love. You often see patience, respond in how you, in our words. Think, well, I'm patient, I'm waiting. By the way, it's interesting, when you go to a doctor's office, you are patient. Like, you got to be patient to be a patient because you're often waiting for a long time. I went to the urgent care, last week, and I was in the room for like 30 minutes. I was like, I went out and I said, hey, I just wanted to make sure you hadn't forgot about me, okay? I'm here. I didn't throw a clipboard on the ground or anything like that, but I was like, I'm here. Just make sure you know. But what happens when your spouse gets home late from work and you're trying to handle things at home? What does patience look like? You want to fly off the handle and say something rude to them? Patience says, no, I'm not going to do that. But patience has the ability to withhold retaliation. It doesn't give up. Jackie Robinson, who broke the baseball's color barrier in 1947, he endured incredible hatred, slurs, threats, humiliation before he even stepped on the field. And Branch Rickey told him, I need a man who has the guts to not fight back. Because any human being, you would think, would want to retaliate when that stuff is being said to you. But he knew there was something much bigger going on. It wasn't about Jackie Robinson. And because he was able to be patient and not retaliate, that made an incredible influence. And you might not be trying to break the color barrier somewhere, but maybe you're trying to break a barrier in your marriage, or you're trying to break a barrier somewhere else. And God says you need to be patient. You need to be patient. Patience doesn't mean you're weak. It actually means you're strong. It means you're strong. So we see in here, first thing is love is patient. What does that look like in our life right now? How patient are we? We also see love is kind. So love is patient. It's kind of the passive, but love is kind. That's the active expression of love. It's intentional. It's proactive. It's taking that first step. It thinks ahead and considers the needs of others. It seeks to help people. It's not just withdrawing from something and saying, hey, there's a need. I want to do something about it. I want to respond in a positive way. I want to do something good for someone. I want to use words to express myself. And one of the ways that you and I can respond with kindness is with gentleness. I heard a pastor say one time, Dad's one of the greatest characteristics, the greatest qualities you can have with your kids is to be gentle. Is to be gentle. You know, are people afraid, as soon as they do something wrong, that you're going to fly off the handle and belittle them? How do we be kind to one another? How do we take that step and take that initiative? It requires something out of us, right? It requires us to actually take action in a relationship. Hey, I'm just thinking, just a simple situation. I don't know, maybe you're in marriage and, the dishes haven't been done or something. And then maybe one of the spouse turns to the other one and says, hey, man, are we going to do these dishes? It's like, why don't you do them? Right? Just if there's a need, how can I step in and be kind? So we see patience and kindness. I don't know about you, but I could read these all day long, every day, and just think about I got work to do. They are like the pillars of love, is patience and kindness. It says love does not envy. Envy is when you're being jealous of what someone else has. And jealousy might be legitimate, like being jealous of someone you love. God himself calls himself a jealous God. He's jealous when you and I have affection or attention towards other people, something else other than him. He wants all of our affection. He wants all of our attention. But what happens is when you and I are jealous of someone else's success or material possessions. And here's how you see jealousy work out a lot. As you see somebody that's being celebrated for something they did, and then someone's got to, in the midst of that celebration, they got to point out something negative about that person. Let me just bring them down just a little bit. Because I don't really want them to get all this accolation and all these in this praise. You're jealous. You see somebody that gets a new car. And you're like, well, let me tell you how they probably got that car. I don't know. Yeah, right? It's like, really? One of the ways to combat jealousy is to publicly praise people. That's a great way, if you feel like you're dealing with jealousy in your heart, is to publicly praise your spouse. Probably can't say that enough. And when people are dealing with jealousy, it's usually something they've been hurt, something going on in their heart. Maybe it's an insecure heart. But love does not envy. It's not jealous. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor. Another translation might say it's not rude. Love takes people's feelings into consideration. I think a lot of times people, when they're rude, This is my take on it. I don't think people necessarily are trying to be rude. They just don't think about what they're doing. And that's the problem. You're not thinking about other people. Being rude, not being rude means you take into consideration people's feelings. And I know people say, well, they might talk in a way that's rude. It's like, well, people, I'm just saying what I'm going to say, and people just need to deal with it. It's like, you're immature and you're lazy. If you're too lazy to actually stop and consider what you're saying to other people and how it impacts other people, that's not, you're immature. Or our behavior can be rude. We do things that, I don't like to be scared. I don't like people scaring me. In case anybody was thinking about scaring me. People like to scare people, and I'm not scared of being scared. I just don't really care for it, And if someone continues to scare me, and I tell them I don't like to be scared, and well, it's funny. It's funny for you because you're being selfish and all you do is thinking about what you want and you're not being considered the other person. The other person doesn't want that to happen, so you shouldn't do it. Being rude says, I'm going to do it anyways. Right? We can have rude behavior. Love does not dishonor others. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. Love does not demand. Love does not insist on having its own rights. That doesn't mean that you can't communicate your desires. Right? It doesn't mean that you just keep your mouth quiet and you don't say what you want to say. But love doesn't sit there and have demands. In order for me to love you, these are my demands. Love doesn't focus on getting. Love focuses on giving. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. Love is approachable. Again, love doesn't have a short fuse. And I ask us this morning, are you approachable? Do they feel comfortable approaching you about things? Are they nervous about you flying off the handle? I tell my boys this. I say, have you ever seen your dad fly off the handle? No. Has he ever seen me yell and rage and scream at everybody in the house? No. I said, how does that make you feel? Good. You feel safe and secure in the home? Yeah. So that's what a man does. A man makes people feel, it provides safety and security in a home. That doesn't mean that the man doesn't have the ability to do something, but you make it a safe space. Especially as a parent, man, I want to be approachable with my kids. I know that's challenging at times because you're the one making the rules, but if you're a boss somewhere, are you approachable? Are people nervous on how you're going to respond? Love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. One of the things that I see destroy relationships so much is when people continually bring up the past. It might have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you're just doing something, and somebody just pops up and say, well, you did X, Y, and Z. Like, what? Love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. It doesn't store up mistakes and use them as ammunition to attack the person in a moment when you feel like that's the right moment to do it. This is the attitude of love. It's powerful, it's compelling. Who doesn't want to be around people like that? Who doesn't want to be around patient people, kind people, that they're not envious, that they don't keep a record of wrongs, that they're not... The love of God is so attractive and so compelling and so real. I mean, who doesn't want to be around that? And, this idea of love keeps record of no wrongs. I read this yesterday. I think it was 2006. A guy came in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and he shot up a school, an Amish school. Killed 5 Amish girls. Horrible tragedy. He's an adult, this man. The next day, the Amish families of those girls visited the shooter's widow and mother and assured them that they had no anger towards them, They loved him. They attended the funeral of the man. He died. They started a fund to support the family. That's what love does. It was transformative. There could have been so much retaliation, so much hate, but love steps in. Love does something different. Love makes a better way. And that's what God does for us. You notice in here that love is so highly relational. It's a choice and it's highly relational. Love itself is expressed in relationships with people. That's why we talk about here a lot. You cannot be spiritually mature and relationally immature. They don't go together. Spiritually mature people are relationally mature. God has empowered us that we should be the markers of what it looks like to love people. Now, we're not perfect. We're all growing, okay? I'm not saying that. But this idea that I could just advocate my relational, tendencies and whatever my hang-ups are, God says, no, I came to change you. Love is a relational choice. It happens in relationships. And listen, you can go online and say stuff, and I'm not saying it's wrong to say stuff, but listen, it's so easy to sit behind a computer screen and to say all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. But you want to know what love is, you want to really grow in what love is, you get involved in relationships with people. Get involved in community with people. And you'll know what love is. And God will challenge you to love. People all the time, they leave churches because they got hurt. Or they weren't happy about something. Can I tell you something? I've been hurt multiple times in this church. And I'm not going anywhere. Because that's not what love does. I'm not saying people do things, we do things unintentionally or things that, we didn't mean to do that. And it's like, well, I can't, I'm out of here. Love says, no, let's work through this together. Let's grow into a deeper relationship and understand what it really means to love one another. It's a commitment. Love is a choice in relationships, but it's also a choice in truth. Look at verse 6. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Listen, love is not blind. Love is not blind. Love has eyes. Love sees. Love distinguishes the difference between truth and evil, between what's right and what's wrong. Love is not confused. There's no difference. Knows the difference. Love does not redefine evil so that to make people feel comfortable. That's not what love does. Love can look at a situation and see objective truth and objective morality and call something that's evil, evil, and call something that's truth, truth. That's what love does. Love is not blind. Love cannot call or celebrate something that's evil and call it good. That's not what love does. You cannot separate love and truth. They go hand in hand. And we don't define what truth is. We allow God himself to define what truth is for us. Love doesn't even define truth. It just responds to the truth. During World War II, German pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer watched the Nazis' regiment corrupt the German church, and many Christians were silent. Some justified evil for the sake of peace. And this is what Bonhoeffer said. He said, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. I think we live in a time, just in our own personal world, I'm not talking about culturally, just even personal, like we all want to be liked. I don't want to like go around and make a bunch of, But I think a lot of times people make choices and decisions on things that are really truth, and they might redefine that. And the real reason is because they want to be loved by people, and they want to be liked by people. And they don't want to be set apart. But listen, love distinguishes between truth and evil. There is truth and there is evil. And love makes distinguishes between the two. It has eyes. It sees. Not only is it able to discern what truth is and what evil is, but it's going to celebrate truth. It says that love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. See, in order for it to celebrate, rejoice in truth, it's got to know what truth is. In order to not delight in evil, it's got to know what evil is. That's why love has eyes. But then it doesn't just see it, but then it's going to desire truth. Love is always going to celebrate righteousness. It's not ever going to celebrate unrighteousness. Love is going to stand out against evil. Again, you can't separate these two. And we live in a world that elevates causes and empathy above morality. But God has a standard for morality. He defined it, and love always corresponds with truth. Love always corresponds with truth. And God's love is rooted in a conviction, not affirmation. It's rooted in conviction, not affirmation. And so, the first commandment that God's given us is to love one another. To love God. And we love God by loving people. We don't celebrate what God condemns. It says in James 4, "You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, who wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." What God is laying out for us is that our love for God precedes any other relationship in our life. That our desire is to love God. And if loving God at times is going to pin us up against other people, then so be it. But we love God and we love truth. Now, God's word does tell us if you love God, you're going to love people. But we don't love people and just ignore morality, ignore what God's called us to do. We don't do that with our kids, right? With our kids, it's like, well, I just love you. Do what you want. It's okay. No, you love them, and so you want to instruct them. You want to help them make the right decisions. And God says, listen, we have got to prioritize our love for God above love for anything else. The reason why we love people is because we love God. The reason why I love Sunshine is because, I love her, but God's commanding me to love her regardless if I think she deserves it in a specific moment or not. I'm called by God to love her regardless, not that she ever does anything, but if she did something, I'm called to love her regardless of what the circumstances are. And so it's actually a bonus point for us to say, I love God first because I'm being obedient to God to love people, to love regardless of what they do. I've got to prioritize my relationship with God. But listen, this is what Jesus says in John 15. He says, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you are of the world will love you as its own. But because you're not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Jesus has laid it out clear. If you love me and follow me, the world will hate you. It doesn't mean that you will hate the world. We're called to love the world. We're called to love our enemies. But it does mean that there is going to be a time where you're going to bump up and what you believe is true and what you stand on is true. It's going to go against the cultural moment, against the push, and that's it. That's what love does. Now, the problem is, some of us in here may be really about truth, and we're like, that's right. I'm standing with truth. I'm not going to celebrate evil. But you totally forget verses 4 and 5. And you go about it in I'm not saying anybody, I'm just saying that people can go about it in completely unrighteous ways, and it just repels people. You can stand for the truth and do it in love. Speaking of Valentine's Day, 3rd century Roman Empire, in the 3rd century Roman Empire, Emperor Claudius II believed that single men were better soldiers than married men, so he outlawed marriage for young men. A Christian bishop named Valentine, refused to comply because he believed marriage was ordained by God, not government. And so he secretly performed Christian weddings for young couples. He was discovered, he was arrested, and while he was in prison, he apparently befriended a jailer's blind daughter and prayed for her healing. And before his execution on February 14th, he wrote a note and said, "From your Valentine." It's where we get Valentine's Day from. But it had nothing to do about romantic love. It was actually came from a guy who was willing to stand for what he believed to be true and was willing to lose his life for it. It wasn't a romantic marketing event that started that way. Do you love your neighbor? Yes. You love your neighbor. Do you seek the world's approval? No. No. So love is a relational choice. Love is not blind. It discerns between truth and evil. It desires truth. So when do you give up? When does love give up? When does love say, that's enough? Never. So verse 7, love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Never fails. Love never fails. You know, love always protects. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can go about the application of that. You know, I read last night about parasites in your marriage. Being protective of your marriage. And look out for parasites. Drugs, gambling, pornography. And I'd probably say greed, jealousy, envy, some other parasites that you can get in there. But we want to be protective of our marriage. What's in our marriage relationship, what we're bringing into it. And I think love also protects people's reputation. Love doesn't slander. Love doesn't gossip. Love doesn't delight in exposing people. I mean, we live in a world, it's just people are just happy to go, I want to just expose everything. The Bible says that love covers a multitude of sins. Love wants to protect people, wants to protect their reputation, wants to restore them, wants to help them follow Christ. Love has spouses protecting one another's reputation. I'm not going to talk bad about my spouse. I'm not going to talk negatively about them. Love always trusts, always hopes. Love always believes the best in the other person. They failed these 3 times, but I got hope. And I'm going to believe what happened this time. You don't want to give up hope. Love always hopes. And love always believes that God can make a way. Some of you are in here and you're dealing with really tough situations, family situations. And let me tell you something. Love always hopes. Love doesn't give up. Do not give up on hope. Do not give up on hope for that person. Do not give on hope whatever you're facing with. Love always hopes. And love always perseveres. Love doesn't quit when it's hard. Love always perseveres. Love never fails. That's why he said the greatest of these, faith, hope, and love, the greatest of these is love. I don't know if it's the way I just presented it this morning, or I kind of feel like everybody's real quiet right now, maybe just the way I presented it, but this is good. It's good for us to kind of evaluate what's going on in our life, where we are at in our relationship with God. And the ultimate portrait of love is found in Jesus. See, Jesus did not ignore truth. He didn't ignore justice. You and I were in sin. He didn't not call us sinners because he wanted us to make us feel good. He said, you guys are in trouble. You guys have abandoned me. You have rebelled against me. I'm a holy God. I'm a just God, and I've got to deal with sin. God responds in reality. But at the same time, God is a merciful God. He's a loving God. And he says, listen, I know that there needs to be justice. There needs to be a demand for sin. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to take the wrath. I'm going to be the payment for you so that you can be forgiven. Love covers a multitude of sins. And Jesus, who died on the cross for your sin and my sin, all of our inability to love, he died on that cross and he rose from the dead the 3rd day and said, I'm giving you life. I'm giving you a future. And for those of you who put your faith and your trust in me, that you'll be forgiven and you're reborn, and I pour my love into your heart through the power of your Holy Spirit, and you can live this life that I created you to live. And Jesus said, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. He will never, ever leave you. Always protect you. Always believe in you. You are to die for. You're worth dying for. So I'm just going to pray this morning. Let's just kind of sit for a moment, just think about, where I am at in my pursuit of love. And I've got a long way to go. Are there any decisions that we should make right now, relational decisions that we need to do things differently? We need to walk away from something or walk towards something. But let's just respond to what God's telling each of us this morning. And let's be the church that God's called us to be.